Hi, you're listening to Erick Avari, and I hope you remember me from Enterprise, Deep Space Nine, and Next Generation. And you are listening to Trek Untold.
Hello and welcome to Trek Untold, the podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. There are actors out there whose faces we've seen in a billion things, but so often we never learn their names. As you all know by now, Trek Untold is about putting a name to the face. And today we have one of those guests who I guarantee you've seen time and time again, and their identity deserves to be revealed and appreciated. Erick Avari has been seen in television and film since the mid-'80s, and continues to work today. He's had appearances in Murphy Brown, L.A. Law, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Cheers, Seinfeld, NYPD Blue, Babylon 5, The X-Files, Daredevil, Castle, The Mentalist, and Warehouse 13, just to name a small handful. However, you might remember Erick best for his roles in Encino Man, Mr. Deeds, The Mummy, and Stargate, where he portrayed a character who returned from the film into the TV series Stargate SG-1. His resume boasts a whopping 150 credits, and we only scratched the surface of his career with our discussion today. As for Star Trek, however, Mr. Avari appeared first in Star Trek The Next Generation as a Klingon named Bijik in the first part of the two-parter from Season 5 back in 1991, Unification. He returned a few years later in 1995 to Deep Space Nine in their third season as a Bajoran priest named Vedek Yarka in the episode titled Destiny. Erick made one final appearance in the Star Trek franchise in 2001, appearing in the first season episode of Enterprise titled Terra Nova, where he played an interesting character named Jamin, but you'll hear all about that in a little bit. Erick is a real actor's actor with an inspiring success story and a great philosophy on performing. It was a true honor for me to speak with Erick for this episode, and I hope after hearing our show today, you'll look at him a lot differently the next time he shows up on your screen. Before we jump into our interview, I want to remind everyone to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Trek Untold, and that's all one word, no spaces. You can also support this show by visiting patreon.com/Trek Untold. If you want to check out some of our merch and put Trek Untold on a shirt, hoodie, mug, sticker, or something else, head on over to teespring.com/stores/Trek Untold to proudly display how much you like this podcast. And if you do happen to get some Trek Untold merch, go ahead and tag us on social media and let us know you got it. We'd love to see it. But most of all, please make sure to subscribe to this podcast and to leave a rating and a review. There is a lot of Star Trek podcasts out there, as I'm sure you already know, and leaving ratings and reviews helps people find us when they're searching for these types of shows. If you're already following us or offering your support in whatever way you can, be it a follow, review, monetarily, or even just listening today, thank you for the help. There's a family of Star Trek podcasts out there, and we appreciate you joining us here each and every week on the show. I'd also like to make a quick shout out to our friends at Triple Fiction Productions, who make some great 3D printed Star Trek inspired products for toys and people. But you'll hear more about them a little bit later on in the show. Now, without further ado, let's beam up this week's guest. Computer, access interview file.
Affirmative. Initiating program.
Welcome back to Trek Untold, and now joining me on the other side of the line, we've got a face you've seen in 150 different shows and movies, 3 of which happen to be Star Trek, but you may also recognize him from The Mummy, Stargate, Mr. Deeds, Days of Our Lives, Dragnet, and so many more, and a bunch of which we're going to talk about today. He's also a fellow lactose intolerant, but lucky for us in Star Trek times, the milk doesn't come from cows anyway. That man is Mr. Erick Avari. Erick, how are you today?
Good morning, Matthew. I'm doing excellently well, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. It's so great to be able to talk to you. I've seen your face in so many things. Again, it's like getting to do this show. I get to talk to all these folks whose face I've seen, but you don't really get to hear much from. So I'm really excited to hear all about your stories and get some great insight from you on what you do.
Looking forward to it.
So I'd like to start with the first question I ask all my guests here, and that is, what is your earliest memory of Star Trek?
When I first came to America, I was going to college at the College of Charleston, South Carolina, and I had a work-study program and all that stuff, and I had a pretty heavy workload in spite of carrying, I think it was 18 credits. Anyway, my jobs varied from, cleaning out student center, garbage cans and things like that, to toilets and whatever, and also sit at the desk, which was great for getting my work done. But every day, every weekday, at 3 o'clock, they put me in the audio-visual room, which is basically a bunch of, headphones, and you could listen to music or watch TV. And 3 o'clock was when Star Trek came on. So every day I would come in and watch Star Trek religiously while I sat there, and it was the best part of my day. So that's my earliest memory of Star Trek, really.
Oh, that's a great memory to have. Now, you were born in Darjeeling, India, and your family actually has a lineage in cinema. So I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit about your family, who they were growing up as a kid in India, and what young Eric wanted to be back then when he grew up.
Well, starting with, actually, it was on both sides, both my mother's side of the family. They were the long-established filmmakers, theater producers. In fact, my great-grandfather was the first to put women on the Indian stage.
Oh, wow.
Prior to that, it was all, like in Shakespeare's time, they were all pants roles. Young boys played those roles. But so I didn't learn that till much later, actually. I was in New York, and I was at the browsing through, doing some research in the library, and Lincoln Center Library, which is such a beautiful place. I spent hours and hours there. So, and I happened to come across a book on Bengali theater in Bengal, and just sort of leafed through it, and there was my great-grandfather. So that was quite revealing. And then also on my father's side, my grandfather, my dad's dad, he was a self-made man, left home at 16, rode across India, apparently, so what legend has it, on horseback. I'm sure he took advantage of trains quite a bit. Anyway, he started movie theaters as well. So it was, movies were in my blood at a very early age. And Wednesdays and Saturdays we were allowed to go. Those were also coincidentally the days that I was most popular at school, because everyone wanted a free ticket. If you've ever seen Cinema Paradiso, that is the story of Darjeeling and the movie theaters in Darjeeling. I mean, the whole town gravitated toward there were 2 cinema halls, and my grandfather owned both of them, sadly. It was, the meeting place of the town, and it was, everyone looked forward to the change in the film, and it was a grand old time that is now sadly gone with the advent of videos, and now, of course, DVDs and computers and everything else. But the old-fashioned movie theater experience seems to have gone by the wayside. I knew what I was not good at, which was math and science. That just didn't appeal to me. But I did very much enjoy literature, history, the whole stories and characters, and I started to really gravitate towards the humanities. But I thought I would love to have been an actor, but growing up in India, wanting to be an English-speaking actor and doing Shakespeare, there was no career there at all. I didn't have any role models to emulate or anything like that. And I also, at that idealistic age, felt that acting was something way too frivolous, and I needed to put my efforts into something that was more meaningful. Anyway, so I, sort of thought about becoming a criminal lawyer or, joining the foreign service and becoming a diplomat or whatever. And I was in ninth grade. Father Maguire was going on about something that was daydreaming, and all of a sudden he said something that caught my attention. And he said artists, and he was talking about painters, poets, actors, so on. Artists traditionally hold up a mirror to society. And typically, when they have failed to do that, that society has crumbled. And he went on to elucidate that point with the Greeks and the Romans, and and on and on and on. And we see the correlation between art and its culture and its heritage, and how it plays in today's society. And is it the dog wagging the tail? Does life imitate art? Does art imitate life? All these questions started to come up, and I started to see a real value to wanting to become an actor. And at that point, I said, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but that is what I want to do. So it was a pretty seminal moment in my life.
Yeah, that's a pretty huge epiphany moment, I guess you'd say.
Mm-hmm.
So when did your family come to America?
No, I came to America.
Okay, you just came by yourself. Okay.
Yeah. I came on a scholarship. Yeah, I was a literature major in India. I got my BA there. It was basically marking time and vamping. It was very, very difficult in those days for us from India to come out to the U.S. because our foreign exchange, we just didn't have it. India was a burgeoning country and just didn't have the foreign exchange. And they said, you're welcome to go, but the Indian rupee is valueless outside of India, so good luck. And what a lot of people did was, they were, you bought dollars in the black market and all of that stuff. But my dad, with his British Army background, was not having any of that. So, I didn't even broach the subject. I knew where that would go in a hurry. So I just had to wait for something to happen. I wasn't sure how or what, but, a chance meeting and in following up on it, I must say my educators were extremely supportive. They went out of their way to plead my case, and being Jesuits, I guess they had a way of, really making that point. So here I am.
So you came to New York City, right? And from there you got eventually.
No, Charleston, South Carolina first.
Oh, you went to South Carolina first. Okay, so yeah, from India to South Carolina, that's got to be a culture shock.
That absolutely was. I was coming to be an actor, and I remember flying across from London to LaGuardia, and the international flight showed movies, and they showed WWW Dixie and the Dance Kings, I believe. And it was, it was very heavy Southern dialect, and if I caught every third word, I was lucky, and I started to go into a panic attack. I thought, oh my God, I'm coming to America to be an actor, and I don't even speak the language. I can't understand what anyone's saying. It was, and I'll go on because it didn't stop there. I had a real harrowing trip. I flew into LaGuardia. I forget whether it was Eastern or Delta, one of those airlines that I was booked on for the remainder of the last leg of my journey, was on strike, and so they put me on to the other flight. Oh, right. Let me take this back. I wasn't flying into LaGuardia. I was flying to JFK, and I had to transfer to LaGuardia because Eastern or Delta was on strike, and the other one was at LaGuardia. So they told me this at the last minute, and they said, you better hurry because you don't have a lot of time. And I said, well, I was, anyway, I was trying to make a case for them to transport me over. I didn't know where I was going or how I was going to get in there. But they were like, good luck, you've got 20 minutes to get there. And sure enough, I missed the flight. So I'm sitting at the LaGuardia airport for 5 hours, I think it was, after flying for more than 24. And with the layover in London and all that stuff. So I was dog tired. And I got mugged in the bathroom.
Oh.
Yes. So the little money that I had, which was $35, I gave over to the guy in the men's room at LaGuardia Airport.
That's not a good way to start things off in New York.
Not a good way to start at all. Not a good way. So anyway, I finally made it to LaGuardia. The next day, to Charleston, and I get to my dorm at 1:30 in the morning, whatever. I wake up the next day and I'm guided to the student center to get breakfast. And as I'm walking across the parking lot, there's a gentleman saying something, and it was just the two of us in this wide open parking lot. And he was waving his hand at me and saying something. And he was wearing a jacket. Now, where I grew up, if you wore a jacket, it was a sign of respectability, not something to be afraid of or anything like that. And I stood my ground, and he was trying to understand what he was saying. And he was saying something like, "Hey, quoi? Let me quoi?" And I thought, he's speaking French. That's right. This is like, yeah, there was that French influence, and New Orleans, and maybe Charleston as well. And I'm trying to figure this out, and then speaking a little French that I knew to say I don't know how to speak French. and he had his hand out, and I shook it. See, and he shook his hand loose, and he yelled. He said, "Lend me a quarter."
Welcome to America.
So here I was, with dreams of Broadway, and severely stepped on with the understanding that I was not speaking the same language at all.
Well, you eventually did make it to Broadway. You made it to New York, and you did some off-Broadway work as well. You were in productions of A Midsummer Night's Dream, The King and I. But I wanted to ask you specifically about working on a show called "'Tis a Pity She's a Whore" at the Public Theater, and you were there with Val Kilmer, right?
Yes, I was.
What do you remember about working with Val Kilmer back then? When was this?
That was 1992, I believe.
Okay.
I'd already moved. I just moved to LA, and I came back to do that show because we'd actually done it. I'd worked with the director, Joanne Akelitis, on a number of shows. She she's just a wonderful, wonderful woman. Started Mabel Minds, which is this experimental avant-garde theater in New York City back in the 60s, So, this is someone who had started this movement and just opened my eyes to theater, and I can't say enough about her. But nevertheless, she was remounting this. We'd done it at the Goodman in Chicago, and it had just received great accolades and reviews. So we were remounting it in New York with Triple Horn, Jared Harris, Wendell Pierce, I could go on and on. Rocco Sisto. I mean, just this wonderful, wonderful cast, and it was I shared a dressing room with Val.
Ah, that must be interesting.
It was just a supremely talented, such a gifted actor, and I always felt like, I think a lot of it was because, and this isn't just me, my sort of uneducated opinion here, but I felt like he had a tortured soul, and that's where he got a lot of that wealth of emotionality, and was able to cap that emotion. I'm getting a little technical here, but I just found him a fascinating actor to watch, and you can't really emulate someone like that because it's so unique, and it's so what he's bringing to the stage is very pure, and to try to emulate that, I feel would just be, pie in the sky. And you can emulate someone who's doing a dance, maybe, or singing a song if you're that talented. But to make the choices and to have that wealth of emotionality is the only word I can come up with at this stage.
Yeah, very versatile
really
actor.
Versatile and deep root. Great experience, and I remember it fondly.
So I want to actually go back in time for a second and talk about one of your earliest films. It might actually have been maybe your first film in America, actually. It's from 1984, and it's this very bizarre and I think almost forgotten movie now called Nothing Lasts Forever. And that starred Zach Galligan, Bill Murray, Imogene Coca, Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Fisher, and Lauren Tom. You were in that as Toulouse-Lautrec. And mind you, this is also the same year that Gremlins came out with Zach. So, I mean, I guess it's easy to see why that one got buried in time versus Gremlins getting as big as it was. Yeah. But, it's a real weird film. What can you tell us about working on that film?
It is. And actually, I mean, I had a tiny part in that. And it was essentially more of a sight gag than anything else. But it was so fun to do because, while I did look like him, especially with those glasses and the hat, but now what do we do about the height, and Zach came up with this idea of, well, they'd already thought it through, doing an oversized portfolio, and I basically held it up sort of in front of me and just scooched down, so I looked like I was 4'3" or whatever it was, it was a day on the set, and for a theater actor, it was just stars in my eyes, and just such an exciting experience.
Yeah, unfortunately, no one's gonna really be able to easily see it now because it's kind of one of those films. I don't even think it got released, did it? Did that even get released? I heard there was like some issues with like test screenings, or it didn't test very well, and it was kind of shelved for a bit.
I never saw it. No, that's not true. I did see a portion of it. Well, why is that? And how was that? I forget now.
That's probably more than most of us have seen.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'd like to dig it up, actually.
If you ever find it, do let me know. I'd love to check some of that out too, because I can't find anything of it. I looked it up. I found a trailer, and I was like, "This is crazy. I got to ask Eric about this."
Maybe that's what I saw. Maybe that's what I can't remember.
So you've appeared in plenty of other TV shows as well, though, that did make it to air, unlike that film. You've been in things like Martin, Cheers, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Wings, Murphy Brown, L.A. Law, Seinfeld. I can go on and on here because you've been in tons of things, many of which didn't involve aliens or starships. We'll save that for a little bit. But the one show I want to ask you about, which is one of my favorites to ask about on Trek Untold, is Murder, She Wrote. And you did an episode in 96 called Mrs. Parker's Revenge, which also had Greg Henry, well-known voiceover performer Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, Time Winters, and another fellow Trek alumni, Tony Todd, in it. What can you tell us about that show? And I always love to hear any good Angela Lansbury stories you got. So yeah, what do you remember about that?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because Tony Todd, I've got to know, and he went to school that my ex-wife went to UConn, so known about him and met him on conventions and everything else. I didn't know him at the time. Time Winters and I knew each other. In fact, we did a play and we worked at a part-time telephone sales job together in New York. So there was that connection. But Angela Lansbury, and I had done a reading with her in New York years ago. It was for Hal Prince, and it was reading of Madame Rosa. And he was interested in mounting it, and Angela came in and read. So I didn't really get to hang out with her at all, but we were in the same rooms, reading from the same script together. And then when I did the ship, she couldn't have been more gracious. She's such a charming, gracious woman. And I remember coming back and telling people, I tell you, the bigger they are, the more real they get. And I remember commenting on that, and I was so impressed that there were just no airs. And she was genuinely, when she asked, "How are you?" she really wanted to know, Yeah, fun. I've been very, very fortunate to have worked with, some of those iconic figures, for me at least,
Yeah, you really have. I mean, just looking at the breadth of your career so far, is so many great folks you've worked with. And you've been in some such big blockbusters, too. You were in Independence Day. You were in the Planet of the Apes reboot that Tim Burton made. The Mummy with Brendan Fraser. 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas. I can keep rattling these things off, but I'm not going to, or we'll be here all day. But this does kind of lead me into asking you about Stargate, where you played Kasuf, whose name I always say wrong, so hopefully I said it okay there. Kasuf, okay, yeah. I had a note for myself. I was like, it said like ketchup, but I didn't read that note. So you were Kasuf, and that was a pretty big moment for your career as well. And you got to work with side by side with Kurt Russell and James Spader. It's a gorgeous looking film. Yeah, what can you tell us about that film?
Now, there again, I had worked with James on an independent movie. I think a year or so prior to that. And it was a completely different movie, and he was playing a completely different role, and as was I. Anyway, when my manager showed me the script and said, "Look, they are interested in you for this role," and I read it, and they said, one of was they described him as an 80-year-old, the elder, and he essentially had, I think it was basically one scripted line at the end of the day, and I thought, no, man, I've been doing a lot of TV, I've been doing some films, I'm not going to do a one-line part, as an 80-year-old, which, I was, gosh, what was that? I was in my 40s. And my manager kind of talked me into it. He said, "Look, no, they're really more interested in improv, seeing what you can do with this whole language issue and all that." And the more I started to think about that and the challenge, and then I thought about aging up as well. That's a good exercise. And I thought, if I get it, I would have my hands, I would have enough to get my teeth into it, And I went out and I auditioned for it, and had a great time. The audition, they were seeing everyone in town for, it was a big cast, and I remember waiting for a very long time, and finally, they was running so far behind that basically we're eating not Dean and Roland, but the poor reader. He was trying to get his lunch in between, all the people he had to read with opposite. Wow. So it was a perfect segue for me to do the candy bar scene without even introducing myself. I walked in, I didn't say hello, I didn't do anything, and I just kind of, it just happened that way, that I noticed the scene, and then I thought, well, let's go with this, So we kind of played out that candy bar scene right off the bat, and Dean and Roland were just howling. And what was great, what made it easier for me was I spoke in Nepali, which I don't speak very well, but I didn't care because they weren't going to understand it anyway. But I knew what I was trying to say, so that seemed that made it much easier for the scene to work, because now you've got that language barrier and all of that stuff. So, and goodness, that was the turning point of my Hollywood career, really. And it didn't come right away. It took a while, because when the film was released, it was not really embraced by the casting community per se. It didn't give me a notch up like I would have. For example, another movie I did before Stargate that is The Beast. In English it's called The Beast of War. That was going to be our platoon. It's an anti-war film. It was based on actually adapted from the play by Bill Master Simone. And it got caught up in studio politics. The head of the studio, Dave Putnam, got fired just a week before we wrapped, and the movie completely went by the wayside. But that one, had it actually been pushed, as it should have been, and given a proper release, I think that would have given my career an immediate jump. Anyway, we never know, right? But it was only after, I think, Independence Day that, once Independence Day came out and the Hollywood community at that point knew Dean and Roland were a force to be reckoned with. I mean, here they were with two blockbusters back to back, and on a roll. They were, right out the gate. I mean, they were, and that's when, it did pick up for us, the underlings, should I say.
Yeah, I want to ask about this one scene in particular that I remember from the film, and that's towards the end, where it's basically you're leading all the people of Abydos down this giant sandy slope towards all the bad guys. It's like this amazing scene, and to me it's extra amazing because you've got an actual horde of real human extras charging down a hill with you. It kind of reminded me a lot of like the old Hollywood epics, like the biblical epics, the Roman Empire epics, which today would be, all CG characters. Wouldn't be really a single human besides yourself. But back then, it had to be actual humans, all choreographed, going down this hill at once, doing this crazy big scene. What do you remember about that scene being filmed? Was that like very chaotic?
I remember it vividly, almost. Yeah. It first of all, just to set it up, the heat. My first week on the set, when we were shooting in Yuma, Arizona, and it was 130, 36, people were passing out, the sand, people were getting sick. But in spite of all of that, and I think perhaps because the conditions were so tough those first 8 weeks that we were shooting in Yuma, that we really banded together. We had no option. And both Dean and Roland and the entire, camera department, everyone kept a sense of humor, and it was a lot of fun, There was a lot of laughing on the set. You came away with a mouthful of sand, but that was okay. Anyway, and I remember my first day on the set, and I get my call sheet. It was a huge day. This is not the day in question, but just to give you an example of what was called for was, 15 principals. We're talking Kurt Russell, James Spader, on and on and on. 15 elders, 35 sheepherders, 150 extras, and 35 dune sweepers. Huh. It's like, what are the dune sweepers? I don't remember them in the script, And I realized between takes, they had to sweep the dunes and make them pristine of the footsteps, because you couldn't have foot-trodden dunes over and over again. So that was the big issue on that particular scene, right, for this. And like you say, we had 1,500 extras.
Oh, my gosh,
and many of them,
that's insane.
Many of them were Spanish-speaking. So we had, there were 6 cameras set up, because not only 1,500 extras, there were explosions going to happen, all that. So we were sent up to the top of the hill, and while the dunes were charged with the explosives, then swept, and the cameras were to get ready, and so all this took a long time, and it was hot, and there was no shade up there, and I could tell people were flagging, and then we'll get there, and I thought, oh man, this is the big scene, we've just got to come down there, with all pistons firing, we can't be looking like we've been sitting out in the sun all day and tired, and, and so I had like a 15-yard lead on all of them, so that I could do that little bit, and then they come up, and so I started doing a little soft shoe routine and a striptease, and, just keeping them sort of entertained, and that worked for about 5 minutes. And finally I said, I used to be a sprinter in back in the day, so I knew I could run pretty fast, and I said, all right, I got $5 to anyone here who beats me to the cameras. And that was like, so we're talking, right, back in the day when $5 was, well, you might get dinner somewhere with $5, and people perked up, and anyway, we finally get to that moment, and all the ADs had told us to run toward the camera, and then, now there were 6 cameras. I knew which camera I was supposed to be running toward, but apparently a lot of the extras didn't. So when we started that charge, right, and people started to come down up over the hill and start to run down, and slowly they started to peel away as if they were just like deserting Kasum because they were going to, different cameras, and what they should have been told was go to this particular camera. And they heard camera, saw a camera, and we just went to that one, So the director was yelling, cut, 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 before the explosives went off, because that would have taken another, however many hours to reset that, right? So, but obviously we couldn't, the hordes running down the dunes couldn't hear. Cut a very, very, very long story short, I popped my hamstring and came down. It was black and blue, and someone went running to the devil and said, Eric popped his hamstring. You know, like, it was basically without missing a beat. He goes, good, he'll run slower next time. Because he was freaking out. He was like, you're supposed to be 80 years old. You're flying down that dude like a 30-year-old, you know. And so, in fact, if you slow it down, you will see actually ace bandage. At one point, my tunic sort of flies up a little bit, and you see the ace bandage around my thigh.
I'm going to have to look for that now.
The hobble was for real. Yeah, it was. Like I say, I remember that it was amazing to have 1,500 people just screaming behind you, you know, and you're amped up, and man, yeah, I don't know how you do that with CG.
No, you don't anymore, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So you got to continue playing your character in Stargate SG-1 also. You did 3 episodes there, and you got to work with the new crew members of SG-1, Richard Dean Anderson, Amanda Tapping, Michael Shanks, and Christopher Judge, a real stellar group of actors. How did you enjoy bringing the character back in SG-1? Did you think you were going to even come back?
Well, you know, I was shooting The Mummy at the time.
Right. And
that's a whole nother story for another time with that role. But it turned out I had I played the role I was originally slated to play in The Mummy, I would not have been able to do this. But at the very last minute, I replaced Omar Sharif, who was supposed to play my role. And so then my schedule changed. I was up at the top, and it was sort of bookended on the shoot. So I had this big gap in the middle. And while I was in Marrakesh, I get this emails from my manager saying, hey, would you be interested? They're looking for an Erick Avari type. I said, I think I'm still an Erick Avari type, so yeah. And it was so fun. I love, like you said, great group of people, you know, and Don Davis also in that group. Another, the rest in peace, my friend. Just a great, warm, welcoming group, and Michael was so close to James. It was kind of freaky, you know, in quality and type, and even in look, you know. Anyway, I guess it just felt very a very natural transition into it. The one thing that I did kind of stumble with was the dialect, because now all of a sudden I'm speaking English.
Yep.
And I, you know, for practical purposes, because I can see where trying to do that in a series, it would just be really, really taxing on writers, performers, everyone, you know. So they decided to go with English, and I thought, okay, well, if I've learned English presumably from my son-in-law, who then I would emulate or try to emulate his accent, right? You know, because that's the only thing that I'm, you know, that's how you get an accent. Obviously, there's certain constant shifts and changes that would come easier for some people or more difficult for others, but typically that would kind of be the dialect, you know. So it was, I don't know, bucking tradition a little bit there, you know, because somehow typically you would go with a generic Middle Eastern accent, but to me that's an issue too, you know. It's like saying, yeah, just do a generic American accent or whatever, you know. There's still traces of whatever. Yeah. So that was, to me, was the only thing that didn't feel absolutely like a continuation of the past, you know.
TREK Untold will return momentarily. TREK Untold is brought to you by Triple Fiction Productions. If you're a Star Trek cosplayer looking for props, or toy collector looking to spice up your shelves, Triple Fiction Productions has you covered. Triple Fiction Productions produces affordable and unique 3D printed Trek-inspired products from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the movies. You can expect the same amount of care and attention to detail in any of the items in their catalog, whether it's a prop replica for use in a fan film, or a part of a cosplay, or accessories and playsets for figures from Playmates, Migos, or Diamond Select. Own your very own tricorder or phaser rifle with working lights, the bridge of the Enterprise E for your Playmates figures, or any other item from countless species and ships from the Star Trek universe. All products are 3D printed in the USA and are constantly evolving and improving based on fan feedback. To learn more about their products, visit them at triple-fictionproductions.net or on Facebook at facebook.com/triplefictionproductions. Triple Fiction Productions, taking Star Trek where no 3D printer has gone before.
If you find yourself listening to your favorite podcast and wondering what microphone they use or how they do their editing, or if you watch a YouTube video and you wonder what camera is that, or going one step further, if you're watching Twitch and you're wondering how your favorite Twitch streamer built their rig and if you can do the same, then Toys and Tech of the Trade is for you. Toys and Tech of the Trade is an interview series where we sit down with content creators, entrepreneurs, and discuss the gadgets and gear that they use to create their content and run their businesses. We use toys in a broad sense, meaning the stuff that just puts a smile on your face, whether it's action figures to something a little bit more complex like musical instruments, cars. You'd be surprised what people consider their toys. Toys and Tech of the Trade can be found on all major podcast providers, including iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and of course, Spotify. Feel free to visit us at RageWorksNetwork.com to check us out.
We now return to Trek Untold.
So Eric, let us now come to your first ever Star Trek appearance, and that was in the Next Generation two-parter. You were in the first part of this one, and that's Unification from Season 5. And you played Bajik, who was a Klingon who the Enterprise contacts for some help to get across the neutral zone.
Yeah.
So can you tell us how you got cast for this role? Were you aware that you were going to be playing a Klingon?
When I came to Hollywood, I thought I could see myself fitting into that, the sci-fi genre. Heavy makeup. I know that they typically like classically trained actors, so I felt like that's going to be my foot in the door. And I didn't see myself playing, back then there was no Indian community per se, other than perhaps you're a 7-Eleven guy, and they were actually from Bangladesh, but that's besides the point. I did see myself going in, and Jenny Lowry, the casting director, took a shine to me, and she would call me in for multiple shows, different roles, and I kept running into issue after issue. One was there was one I went out for that required the full contact lens thing, and it was for an 18-episode role, and I just could not get. And I told them up front, I said, look, I don't wear contacts. I am squeamish about my eyes, so I'm really not. I've got to let you know up front that I may not be able to do this. And so I'll go ahead and read anyway. And I read, and they said, go down. Hair and makeup is waiting for you, and they'll try to put it in. Let's see how that goes. And so they're very gentle, and they were very gentle, but I was just way too squeamish. And the lenses were so, the full lens, hard lenses. And even when I finally did get it in, I basically couldn't even open my eye without just streaming tears. And, so I gave it my all, but I couldn't do it. So then they finally called me back for this, and I got it, and I was thrilled because I was finally going to meet this cast and all this stuff, And I get there, was in the makeup chair for 3.5 hours, and they said, "Okay, they're ready for you on set." And I was like, "Great!" Oh, and the one thing was they didn't have boots my size, because apparently I was the shortest Klingon they'd ever hired. So they had like size 13s, and they said, well, no one's going to see it anyway, but we'll put them on just so you have the tops at least, that they might see the tops. And I clumped in there, and the set was there, and they said, okay, they're all at breakfast and getting makeup, so we'll just do it with the first AD, Reed. I was like, how do you mean I'm not going to meet anyone? Actually, on the set, I think we did 2 takes, and they were like, great, that was wonderful. Enjoy the rest of your day. It took longer to take my makeup off than to actually do it.
See, I would have left the makeup on just to walk around like that.
Yeah, right.
So you basically spent like 3.5 hours doing makeup for essentially a 10-minute scene.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right.
That's the Star Trek experience, right?
That was my first Star Trek experience, yes.
So you returned then to Star Trek for Deep Space Nine, the Season 3 episode Destiny, and you had a much meatier role this time around. You were Vedek Yarka, who is this wonderfully condescending Bajoran priest who was recently defrocked, who believes that there's a prophecy that's going to come true if Sisko helps the Cardassians on a certain scientific endeavor. And this episode is about biases and interpretation of facts and information, a topic that's very relevant today still. Did the story resonate with you in any way when you first read the script?
Yeah, that one came at a time when I was in negotiations to do an episode, do a TV series, and we were having a hard time with, all this stuff. And I got this script, and I thought, oh, this is going, Star Trek, the show hadn't aired yet. And when I read the script and the concept and all that, I thought, oh my goodness me, this is going to be huge. I just loved it. I loved the concept, and I just really wanted to be a part of such a great character, and so to me it was so typically Star Trek, the old Star Trek, in terms of how they're getting their message across. I loved it. I jumped at that opportunity.
So how was the makeup process different? Because this time around, you don't have the giant Klingon forehead, but you still have the Bajoran nosepiece and the Bajoran priest outfit, the Vedek outfit. So how was the makeup process different?
Yes, I loved it. I loved the costume, and I loved the earring, and the nose was so easy, that was an easy one.
Now you got to spend a lot of time in this episode with Avery Brooks and Nana Visitor. Just tell me a little bit about working with those two. I love those two. They have such great chemistry together, and I've heard great things about roles with them.
Yeah. What I remember about that, it was Nana was so, both of them actually, they were just so professional. We covered a lot of material. I remember being quite surprised at how quickly we went through pages and pages of dialogue. So there wasn't a lot of time to chit-chat, a lot of it was, we were going. And it was very smooth, very, very professional, shall we say, We were pulling close on 16-hour days. And they were long days. And I was really gave me a sense of how difficult this job can be for someone who's doing this week after week after week, pulling that kind of load.
So how did you approach this role of Vedek Yarka? Did you call on some real-life experience from your time about going to school with Jesuits, priests? Or was there something else? Like, how did you create the role of Vedek Yarka and make it interesting for yourself?
I think a lot. Yes, I think the Jesuits perhaps had a lot to do with it. I'd also played, a lot of priests, Friar Lawrence for one, in Romeo and Juliet, and so priests. When you're a character man, bald, priests and doctors are really good ones. You get to play a lot of those. So that part of it was easy, and really, for me, honestly, I find that the preparation for a role so much. It's exploration. A director once, if I can, I think, on my own horn here. A director once said, you're like a curator. You go and you brush away all the sand from around the role, and then we see the skeleton, and then you add from there. And I thought, what a nice description of my work method. I'd never really thought of it that way. But I think that does kind of say what you want to do with a role is strip away and get to the root. What is at the bottom of this? And here's a man, if I can remember, the plot correctly, but he sincerely believed he was seeing all the signs of what was going to come, and it was on him to convince the rest of the starch, the fleet, to heed his warning.
Yep.
Or it could come to catastrophic ends, So it's very easy to now put yourself in a position where it's easy to grasp that. It doesn't take, in realistic terms, how you want to get your point across and they're not getting it. And then just look them in the eye and get your point across, no matter what it takes, and just think about that, actions and objectives, So a lot of my work as preparation is stuff that I would do and then throw out once I get to the set and I'm looking the actors in the eye. If I may give you a very vivid example of this, and going back to The Beast, the movie that I'm determined to plug.
Check out The Beast of War today.
Yeah, that's right. But I remember when I auditioned for that, there was a moment when I, spoiler alert, confront George Zunzo, wonderful, wonderful actor. And I played it one way when I was at the audition, and when I was actually looking him in the eye, it was a whole different take and so much better, because all that bravado that I could show at an audition when I'm just looking at, no one basically on the other end, it's easy to conjure up. But when you're actually looking someone in the eye, eyeball to eyeball, and you put yourself in that position in the scene, and that you could lose your life. Now go ahead and say the line. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. So this episode that you did was directed by Les Lando, and oddly enough, he was also the director who would have directed your TNG appearance, but again, we already heard about what happened there. But what do you remember about working with Les? Was this your first time working with him?
Yes, it was, and I really enjoyed it. And we did actually get to hang out a little bit, and I can't remember anything specific other than really enjoying working with him. He was very gentle and he was very appreciative. So it's there's no it's very easy for an actor to get along with someone who likes your take and likes what you're doing. Makes it very pleasant. That's not to say I do like being challenged, though. As if a director were to come and say, "Look, that's not where I want to go at all. I want you to think about this. Go there." Sure. I like that too. But but I just remember the experience with Les just being very, very pleasant and very the whole shoot actually. And on Enterprise, speaking of directors, I worked with LeVar Burton.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and jump into Enterprise. In fact, now that was your last appearance in the Star Trek franchise. You were in the episode from the first season called Terra Nova, and you played Jamin, who was a descendant of some lost colonists from Earth who are now living underground, unaware that they're humans. It's a pretty interesting episode. Yeah. And that was directed by LeVar Burton.
Yes. And Mary Carver, who played my mother, was LeVar's acting teacher at USC.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So basically, you got the student directing the teacher now.
Yeah, right. It was wonderful, and I'd worked with Scott Bakula on TV series prior to that as well. I forget what it was, but so we'd worked together, and it's nice, and that cast. John Billingsley is a dear friend today as well, and Dominic Keating. I got along very well, and we still sort of keep in touch. So yeah, it's nice. That world, the sci-fi world, attracts some wonderful people, and I was very lucky and privileged to be part of that world. I really enjoyed, and I also enjoyed stretching my imagination.
Yeah, all your Star Trek appearances, even in particular, they're all very different from each other.
Yes. Well, very different roles, aren't they? Yeah.
And they all present, I imagine, different challenges to you as an actor, because one day you're doing a Klingon, the next day you're doing a priest, and then you're doing a subterranean cave dweller, basically.
Yeah. I think that was the one I enjoyed most, the Terra Nova, the subterranean, because I love the sense of humor of just absolutely hating these humans, only to come to find out, hello, I'm human too.
Classic Star Trek. And so the makeup here too, it's very interesting because we were talking about before the makeup. This was like something that never been done before, right? How did the crew go about creating the underground cave dwellers?
Well, I remember sitting in there with Mary while they played with makeup. We came in a day early, and they played with this, that, and the other thing, and then finally settled on this. Yeah, that was sort of like I was alluding to earlier. The makeup was weird, and I think not having done it before, it was, you don't know what the problems are until you actually go through a day of shooting, and get to refine it. And they did. Over the course of that episode, they sprayed it down so that it didn't run quite so much, and kept its form. It's like that. Kept the color. I remember the colors were difficult to maintain.
So, having been on 3 different Star Trek shows, 3 different franchises, what can you tell us about the differences between the environments on each of those sets?
They were all, I remember, I think the upstairs on all those sets being consistent had a lot to do with the consistency that I felt on all 3 sets. That there was a very, very strong attention to the script. You do not deviate, not punctuation or letters. And obviously there is a sense of tradition and I think Enterprise less so because it hadn't yet been established in terms of tradition, in terms of the framework of the story, the world that they're inhabiting. That was a little looser than Deep Space Nine and Next Generation, where I felt that they were, and not being diehard Trekkie, I wasn't quite sure of my footing sometimes, pronunciation of something or whatever, or what is that alluding to, and sometimes you don't want to ask because you don't want to sound foolish, but sometimes you just have to. But Enterprise, there was less of that because it, like I say, they were still discovering and creating that world, which was closer to our time, so it was easier,
So after Enterprise, did you audition for any roles in any other Star Trek shows?
No, that was it. I'd done, and it said I never auditioned for Voyager, so that was it.
See, that would have been fun to have you on Voyager too. That's unfortunate.
Wasn't there something about Voyager that you could, if you'd done one, you couldn't do the other? That you would be on the wrong side? I don't know.
From what I've heard, basically, if you're an alien, you can get recast into different shows, but the minute you show your human face, basically, that's when they don't want to deal with you again.
Yeah. And I know with Next Generation, there was a consideration that I was a little too close to Patrick Stewart in terms of, the bald head and the timbre of my voice and something that I remember that being an issue on one of the roles that I went out for.
That's interesting because we've heard something similar with another actor we spoke to a few episodes back, Carl Held, who he was in the original series, and he had worked a lot with Shatner. They both had similar looks, and because of that, basically when they filmed the episode where Carl and Shatner are together, most of the time Shatner, in terms of the blocking, he's always in front of Carl Held and practically like blocking most of his face in a lot of those shots. So that's kind of interesting. It's just a Hollywood thing, I guess.
Interesting. Yeah. What they say is true. It has not, the fact that you didn't get the part has very little to do with what you did at the audition. But I know actors, we tend to beat ourselves up so much. It's like, oh, if only I'd done that, or and and it has nothing to do with anything.
So outside of Star Trek, of course, you've continued to do many, many things. There's tons of things we could talk about. I mean, even The Mummy alone, I feel like that's just a whole episode for itself. But I want to talk to you about one of your comedy roles, and I think this is probably the one that people might remember you the most for, and that was when you were in Mr. Deeds, and you got to sing Ground Control to Major Tom with Adam Sandler. That must have been just a blast to work on with that crew and that cast.
The hardest part of that show was trying to keep a straight face. and actually both literally and figuratively, but I did have to keep a straight face in order to keep that beard on. There's a story behind that. So I just come off, actually I'm still on the tail end of Planet of the Apes, I think. Yes, right. When they cast me, we were just wrapping Planet of the Apes, where I was shaved completely, right? And they said, we really want to use him in this role, and we want his beard to be out as bushy as possible. And I said, well, I'll do my best, but there's only so much I can do, and there wasn't enough time for me to really grow it out. So that's the most difficult part to add on. So I had these huge bushy mutton chops with the chin shaved, and every day next up we'd put that on. So eating and excessive laughing were not allowed for me. But that was such a blast. And I mean we got to do just such cool stuff. Like we shot hoops in Madison Square Garden one day.
Yeah.
And John Turturro, Peter Gallagher, great cast, fun. And Adam is just, I can't say enough good things about him. He's just a good guy, he genuinely, he's very empathetic. I think that's what I like about his acting and being with him. I'll tell you a little story. One day I was in my trailer, and knock on the door, and Adam goes, Anderson, go in. Get your ass out of here. And he walks around. I said, where were you going? He said, just come with me. And we go into his trailer, and there are a bunch of kids, teenagers, and clearly they were all cancer patients. And they were from Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Ah.
And, most of them were bald, And as he walks in, he goes, hey, Baldy! They just sort of, it's a moment of kind of horror, Because, I want you to meet my other Baldy friend here. And he points to me, And they just, and he's so good with people that I don't know. I just love that man. I love him. He's got a great heart. And he's funny. I think he's hysterical.
And I would be remiss today if we didn't talk about this one other comedic role that you had a little bit earlier before that role, and that was in Encino Man. I think this might be like one of your most quotable lines, maybe. You know where I'm going with this already. Wheezing the Juice. What can you tell us about Wheezing the Juice with Brendan Fraser and Pauly Shore?
I was going to ask you not to bring it up, and then I thought of it because I've fought that stereotype for all my career, ever since I can remember. And I went out for that. I was very early in my when I just come to LA, and I'd started doing some TV work, and I kept bugging my agents to get me out on films. I think my forte is really film rather than TV. And so he said, okay, here's, there's this casting director. She casts a lot. She casts a lot of film. They're looking for, this Indian 7-Eleven guy. And I was like, no. And they were like, no, wait. They want someone with an improv background and all this. And I did have a strong improv background. So I said, okay. And he said, just go show your face. You probably won't get it because as far as his words, he said, you don't look Indian enough. They'll probably get, anyway. So I said, okay, I'll go out and do this. And I went in and ad-libbed, and I did the dialect and everything. And I was spoofing it, really, And the more they laughed, the broader I got, and, and then I got the offer, and I remember my reaction was, oh, shit. I can't do that. And they were like, now what am I going to say at that point, But I thought about it a lot, and I really regretted doing that. And I thought about that too. I've been confronted with this a lot, okay? Is something funny only because of the accent? In other words, if you take that accent away and do exactly what everything else, is it still funny?
Very true.
And when I was defending myself, I would say what actually got the laugh was not the accent, but it was this man who clearly doesn't speak Encino speak, or Pauly Shore speak, does the you-oohs. That was actually what made it funny. That he wasn't, that he was really angry and just repeats exactly what he heard,
Yeah.
No, you know what I mean. Yeah. So.
As I was doing this interview too, I was thinking to myself whether or not I actually did want to ask you that question about that, because it is a super negative stereotype. And, looking through your career and even watching you on TV, as I've seen you through different shows, so many times you're playing these stereotypical characters. I know it's got to be tough, especially for you. So, my question to you is, how do you balance an accurate portrayal of a human being versus a negative portrayal of a stereotype?
Yeah. It's like I with comedy, I'd say that is one. That to me is the yardstick, and I had to think about this a lot because I was confronted with it a lot.
Yeah.
And I did the same thing on Martin. Now, the thing about it is, this guy is a 7-Eleven clerk. A lot of the clerks that I saw at 7-Elevens did have very broad accents, Now, how am I going to play that and realistically and come across sounding like a foreign diplomat instead of a 7-Eleven clerk? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you have to be realistic on the one hand. Secondly, I was one of three, well, there were literally 3 Indian actors in Hollywood of my age that, we didn't have the opportunities that we see today on TV with, Indian doctors, Indian roles, and, Indian lawyers, young kids speaking without dialects, the first generation of Indians. It was the immigrant Indians that there were no roles being written. Tons of roles as terrorist kind of guys, that's where I drew the line in the sand, And it's, again, picking your battles. Because if you, as an actor of my ilk, a character actor, not a name draw, you can't be laying down, the law and saying, no, I won't play that, and I won't play this, and I won't play that. Although I tried, there was a time when I actually pulled out of a shoot during the shoot because they changed the script, and it suddenly became very offensive to me, and I had to bow out. It was a very, very difficult moment in my career.
I mean, I feel like things have started to change, but I mean, you're going to be the better judge of that. I mean, do you think that things have gotten better in at least the past decade? Infinitely.
And I think they got worse because in my early days, there were no real Indian roles, But then when I say Indian, I'm talking, let's say ethnic roles, okay? Because I played a variety of those ethnic characters. I wasn't confined to Indian.
Yeah, we could say like South Asian or Middle Eastern types characters, I guess.
Yeah. And so among those 24, that show, I turned that one down, I don't know, a number of times until they stopped calling me. Then I started to become known as being difficult, or who does he think he is? I had someone's whatever, But I when I didn't agree with the morality of what we were portraying and how we were depicting a type of people, a whole race, not just 7-Eleven clerks. I don't mean to denigrate 7-Eleven clerks, but, when it's that specific, okay, you can be a little stereotypical. But when you're talking about a whole race of people, that's just pushing it to, that's racism.
Yeah.
That's bigotry.
And it's not surprising to me to hear that, like, you'd be defending yourself and then you'd be labeled as being a troublemaker in Hollywood. It's unfortunate that's what you had to deal with, but I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that you were able to defend yourself and endure.
Used to hearing no, They at first they think it's a negotiation tactic, and then when they realize it's not, then they get mad, and it's not good to anger Hollywood. And you're a little guy. But, I don't mean to denigrate Hollywood. It's given me a wonderful life, and I have very, very much to be thankful for, and I'm enjoying that right now as I'm looking out over this beautiful landscape in Portland.
So let's talk about something else you're working on these days, one of your more current projects. You're working on a documentary now called The Milk of Human Kindness. This is a crowdsourced documentary. It's very interesting. Can you tell our listeners today what this doc is all about?
In a word, kindness. But sounds like such a simplistic thing, a simple concept, and my hope was to bring some light on the subject and show just how elusive it actually is. No matter who you ask, I think with the odd exception, someone says, no, I don't believe in kindness. But everyone, yeah, I believe in kindness. I'm all about kindness. And I had one person go, oh yeah, I'm all about kindness. All lives matter. And that to me just sums it up. When I actually was saying all lives matter, it's like, how much more unkind could you be? As you're saying. So that's, I guess, in a nutshell, what I'm trying to do. To be honest, it is not going well. And I'm struggling with it because I'm able to scratch the surface with the crowdsourcing method that I was hoping to do.
And when we say crowdsourcing, can you actually explain to our listeners what we're doing with crowdsourcing?
Yes, it's not crowdfunding, not to be confused with crowdfunding at all. By source, I mean I'm asking you for your input, your submission, your video submission. And I had three basic, and I wanted to get, everyone's story. It started out, I was actually doing it when I left Hollywood in 2016. I was I toured the United States in my RV, and I was actually meeting people and interviewing people as I went along. And then my health issues took over, and I had to get surgery, so that put an end to that. And then I didn't want to let it go, so I came up with this idea about crowdsourcing. But if I can't go to the mountain must come to me.
Yeah, that's a smart way to do it.
Yeah, I think what I'm lacking there is the probative value of an interview, is to get beyond the scripted response and get something that's more challenging than three basic questions about kindness. So I'm still, struggling with that, but I'm not letting go. I have, in fact, bridged one big obstacle on my Facebook. I've always stayed away from religion and politics, but not a long story, but I ended up doing a series after I'd left Hollywood on Jesus, the life of Jesus, and I played Nicodemus.
Yeah, that's the Chosen, right?
Yes. And that's become a very, very, very strong sort of following among the evangelical community, and it's kind of sort of put me in now my fan base is sort of split, if you will. Many of the Chosen fan base only know me from the Chosen. And they're very, they're much more dogged about this than the sci-fi fan base, and so to talk about politics and what's going on is disturbing to a lot of them, but I've decided I'm not going to pull my punches just because I played a role.
Yeah. Well, I've found that most folks in the Star Trek fandom and the Star Trek community have been, besides being fairly progressive, I think they're very receptive. This might be a great thing for a lot of Star Trek fans to hear about and possibly submit to your doc. How can our listeners be part of this documentary?
Yes, the easiest way is if you go to my Facebook page. There's a link up there, and you just click on the link. You get all the details, and it's really simple. Essentially, what it would take is a cell phone or your tablet or whatever, and just record yourself. But I want to revamp those questions, because I don't think that, I think the onus is on me. I've got to fix that in order to get a better response out of people and to get to the heart of what they really believe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the challenge of documentary filmmaking. That's what I do outside of this right here. And it's an evolving process. You kind of have to learn as you go, and it's not really up to you what the documentary is going to be about or how it's going to happen. It's kind of up to the documentary to do itself.
Yes, but to get to the heart of the issue is kind of up to the documentarian, isn't it? To poke and to prod and to follow leads or whatever.
Ask the uncomfortable questions.
Yeah. And pick up on things that you hear at the moment and say, well, what do you mean by that? Or how do you feel about this? You just said that. So, not that we're trying to trip them up, but we're trying to get to the real meat of the issue.
I think that's what filmmakers mean when they say they're looking for the truth.
Yes. And that is what, I was talking to someone about acting, and I said, it's the truth. You have to look for the truth. And this, what do you mean? Because it's all a lie anyway. I was like, yes. But once you get past that lie, then it has to be the absolute truth. You have to get beyond the lie that you're not really that person. But after that, you must tell the truth. I said that about someone. I said, that woman doesn't know how to lie on or off stage. And that to me is a supreme compliment. And I love working with, I love being with people who can't lie.
So for any of our listeners who want to submit, you could check out Erick's social media pages or go to stubbatoeproductions.com, and all the information is going to be there so that you can submit and be part of this doc.
Thank you so much for doing that, Matthew. You did it better than I did.
I've had a lot of practice with that kind of stuff.
Yes, you did.
So, Erick, what is the best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe?
Well, we're the fan base, right?
I would say so.
I love going to the conventions. It's really become a very enjoyable, sometimes exhausting, because I just love talking to the fans. You meet all kinds of people from all walks of life, but the common thread is their imaginations are well developed, shall we say, open, receptive, and that tells you something about the mind of those people. And those people, I hate to say that, but the fan base. I find it true that I don't come across a lot of close-minded people. And I find a lot of disabled in one way or another, that, people who have been unable to, for some physical disability, that they've been confined to home and watching TV and have just been sucked into the sci-fi world, and that is such a wonderful gift, isn't it? And it's something that I, as an actor, I take very, and that's why I say truth. You owe the fans that. You owe them that. Tell the truth when you're up there. As much as coming back to the Beast, as much as I would like to have been all bravado and matinee idol, I was not. And that would have been a lie.
Well, it kind of reminds me of that famous quote from Captain Picard on Star Trek Next Generation, where he says the first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth. So I think that's why it's so ingrained in Trekkies.
Interesting. I think that should be the mantra here in America.
If only.
To the truth. Yeah.
Erick, thank you so much for being so incredibly generous with your time today, all of your stories, all your insight and your experiences. We had a lot of fun chatting today. I hope you did too.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
And for folks, once again, who want to check out the documentary that you're working on, The Milk of Human Kindness, head to stubatoeproductions.com. All the information is going to be there. It's a really great doc, so I wish you much success with that. And again, thank you so much. I could definitely see your passion for the fans here, and I look forward to hopefully meeting you one day at a convention.
Post-coronavirus.
Absolutely.
I'm sure.
Thank you so much, Eric. Appreciate your time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
That was our discussion with Mr. Erick Avari, who is absolutely one of those actors that deserves more acclaim and notoriety than he receives. I can't thank him enough for joining us today, and I wish him much success with his documentary. And for you listeners out there, do make sure you check out stubatoeproductions.com to learn more about the doc and to learn how you can participate. Trek fans are one of the best fandoms I've ever been a part of, so let's go ahead and help out a Trek alumni and make his dream become a reality, and even better, show the world what Trekkies are truly made of. The character of Vedek Yarka was named after one of David S. Cohen's professors at SUNY Albany, Jarka Burian. Burian was an authority on Czechoslovakian theater, and was heralded as the author of the most definitive book on the subject. Cohen, who wrote this episode, also did a rewrite on the DS9 episode Crossover, which he was uncredited for. But as for this episode, Destiny, the episode was originally meant to be a little bit more about Starfleet trying to remove Sisko from his position of power, with the Starfleet brass being unhappy about Sisko being considered an emissary while also being in charge of a space station. It would have had some notes similar to Heart of Darkness, but ultimately the story evolved more into what it became that we saw aired, which also included the parallels to the Cold War, which is the reason behind Galora and Ulani being a part of this episode, but those two characters are going to be a story for another day. Thank you again for listening to this week's episode of Trek Untold. Please make sure you follow us on social media to see all of our memes and daily guest updates. And who knows what else, because you never know what pops up on our pages. All you have to do is look for Trek Untold on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you and hear what you think about this week's episode. If you'd like to support this podcast, check out patreon.com/TrekUntold to learn how you can keep our ship operating at full power. You can also check out some of our merchandise at teespring.com/stores/TrekUntold. That's TEE spring.com. That includes shirts, stickers, mugs, phone cases, and a whole lot more. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this show and give us a review and rating on iTunes or wherever you listen to it. If you enjoy what we do here every week on this show, please give us a 5-star rating and review. It's the best way to make new listeners discover this podcast and help us grow. Once again, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Triple Fiction Productions. If you'd like to send us some feedback, suggest a guest, would like to be booked on the show, or are interested in sponsoring us, email me at trekuntold@gmail.com. Once again, this has been Trek Untold. I'm Matthew Kaplowitz, and until next time, fortune favors the bold.